welcome to another video. Today it's all about the Norma sweater. I will be going through the entire experience knitting up this sweater. It's part of the ECA Archives collection, which I've been trying to knit through since March. This is the second sweater that I managed to finish. The first one was the Karla cape by Anna Fensel, and I already have a vlog of that one on my channel, so I will leave a link to that in the description box below. But let's just start at the beginning, which is the cast on, and this is where I encountered my first problem, and that is because the pattern tells you to use a tubular cast on, and I had never done that before. And so I went on YouTube, I looked at a couple of tutorials, and I was struggling because it was so fiddly. I was using tiny needles and it was just not a fun time, but I managed to cast on the right amount of stitches and I just started working on the ribbing. And that's when I found out that I knit where I was supposed to purl and purled where I was supposed to knit. So I had to rip it all out. Yep. I ended up putting the project on hold for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then I came back with a better outlook. I went on YouTube again, and of course I found the video that I should have gone to straight away from, obviously, the knitting tutorial queen of YouTube, Very Pink Knits. She has a video on her channel on how to do the tubular cast on whilst using the backwards loop cast on, and that worked a miracle for my cast on edge. It was very easy, very intuitive, and so after that it was smooth sailing. After I finished the ribbing, it was time for some short rows to raise the back of the neck, and I opted for Japanese short rows just simply because I've used them so often. I like the way they look, and they're simply just my favorite type of short rows, and they work very well in this project. The yarn that I'm using for this project is Viking Eco Highland wool. It's a DK Wake yarn, 100% wool, and I use this instead of the Easier Tweed and Easier Silk Mohair combination because I needed to budget, and I also prefer to knit with one strand of yarn. Also, my experience working with this yarn has been great. I really loved the feel when it was in my hands. However, when I first wore the sweater, I was surprised at how, well, it wasn't very scratchy, but it wasn't very soft. But now that I've worn it a bunch of times and washed it as well, it has softened up. Just as all other pieces from the ECA Archives collection, the Norma sweater is inspired by one of Åsa Lund Jensen's designs. My own guess is that this one is from either the 60s or early 70s. The Norma sweater itself is described as a classic raglan design with a high mock neck. The construction is top down, knit in the round with some short row shaping at the neck and with a large amount of negative ease, especially for the sizes on the smaller side of the range. This is a very popular fit at the moment, but not something that I feel really suits my own body. I'm short and I have quite a muscular build, so I did make a couple of modifications along the way, such as shortening the body and sleeves, as well as reducing the armhole depth and sleeve circumference. But for now here, I'm just working on the top of the yoke, which is for the most part just plain stockinette with some color changes and a few rows of stranded colorwork knitting. To my surprise, the pattern didn't come with a chart, but rather just the entire sequence written out in words. I myself tend to prefer patterns with less text, and I ended up getting slowed down a bit by trying to read the entire text of how to do all of the colorwork with the yoke increases. But I ended up figuring out that it was a quite consistent sequence or pattern, so to speak, and after having figured that out, I didn't really need to refer back to the pattern for the rest of the yoke increases. Here I'm just putting some of my stitches on hold as I had finished the yoke. Like I said before, I made quite some modifications to get a more tailored fit, but in order to do so, I of course needed to actually know the finished measurements of the garment, and the pattern itself didn't include that. So I ended up spending some time using the instructions to calculate all the measurements I would need, and I actually found a very easy solution for most of the parts of the sweater that I wanted to address. Basically, if I were to stop working on the yoke about 5 centimeters earlier than the pattern suggested, I would be decreasing the body by about 10 centimeters, bringing the bust circumference from 107 centimeters down to 97 centimeters, resulting in a sweater with positive ease of about 15 centimeters for me. Additionally, this would cause the sleeve circumference to reduce by 5 centimeters, and so after this I just had to figure out how much I still wanted to decrease the sleeves and by how much I wanted to shorten them as well as the body. Aside from changing the fit, I also decided to knit this sweater flat. I have no objection to, nor do I harbor any malice towards purl stitches. In fact, I like to practice my purl stitches as it helps to improve my work. In any case, the reason I'm knitting this piece flat is just because I wanted some additional structure, and I also did not want to deal with the jogs that I had to deal with when I was working on the yoke. The body was pretty straightforward. I just worked even down. That was it basically. After having worked a substantial piece of the body, I wanted to check the fit. This is something I'm actually trying to rely on less, as I want to knit sweaters more often in pieces in the future. I'm working towards just relying on cold hard numbers, but I recognize that it's nice to be able to try on your piece as you're making it, even just as a way to get excited about what you're working on. The thread I'm using for seaming is actually just one ply of the grey yarn. Splitting the yarn for your seams helps to remove some of the bulk, and in this case that doesn't really matter because the sweater has quite a bit of positive ease, but it can be very significant if you're working on a more tightly fitted knitwear piece. After finishing the back panel right before the ribbing, I started working on one of the sleeves. I didn't do a ton of decreases as I had already significantly sized down the sleeve, so it was mostly just figuring out a natural place to stop in the pattern right before the ribbing. I ended up with one pattern repeat less than the pattern recommended and took out about 1 centimeter from the ribbing. This left me with a sleeve length that I was comfortable with. After finishing the sleeve, I moved on to the front of the sweater. Generally, when I work bottom up, I will knit the ribbing flat, but going top down, I usually just knit the ribbing in the round, not for any particular reason other than just preference. one thing I still would like to mention about this sweater is that at the yoke, I actually didn't size up for the collar work rows, and that ended up not really being an issue. However, for the body and the sleeves, I did size up, and for some reason there was a bit of puckering. So after having worked the back and the first sleeve, I sized up again, and there was still some puckering. At first I was a bit confused by that, but now that I'm talking about it, I think it's because my purl stitches are a bit tighter than my knit stitches, so I think that's actually the thing that was causing all of the puckering. In any case, most of it I feel blocked out in the end, but if I had to redo this sweater, I would definitely go up at least 3 sizes for the collarwork sections when knitting flat. I ended up taking out about 10 centimeters from the length of the body, and after finishing the ribbing I went straight to the second sleeve and worked it the same way as I had done the first. The knitting was now done and I had a lot of ends to weave in, but before doing so I blocked the sweater. In between knitting, I actually pressed the sweater a couple of times with my iron and a pressing cloth, which you might have noticed at some points in the video. After blocking, I spent quite some time weaving in the ends. I like to see this as a kind of meditative part of the project, so I will usually do this in the mornings with some nice music on, and it has become such a nice part of the process of knitting for me. And here is the final result. I absolutely love how it turned out. I'm very happy with all of the modifications that I made, as well as my color choices. It has been a couple of months since I finished making the sweater, and I have got a ton of use out of it already. Generally, I'll wear the collar folded, but sometimes when it's cold out, I actually have the collar up. But sometimes when it's a bit chilly, I will actually have the collar popped up. If you are interested in my written notes on this sweater, I have left a link to my Ravelry project page in the description box below. If you'd like to support my channel, you can do so by liking, commenting and subscribing, or by donating a coffee over at ko-fi.com. In any case, as always, thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye bye!